Welcome back to the Ruby Tuesday, Ruben here, and today we're diving deep into Rebel Ridge, the much anticipated Netflix thriller from director Jeremy Saulnier. If you're familiar with Saulnier's work, you already know this guy is all about intense storytelling, shocking violence, and that raw, visceral feel to his films that we've come to know from his previous titles. So the big question is, does Rebel Ridge live up to the hype, especially after all the production delays that this film has had? Or is this just another John Wick / John Reacher movie, or John Reacher if you combine the two? Let's find out. Let's talk about the direction. Saulnier's signature, previously brought us Green Room and Blue Ruin. He is a master at building tension using minimal dialogue and letting the visuals do the heavy lifting. In Rebel Ridge, you can absolutely see this in the DNA of the film. This is a movie that doesn't hold your hand. Instead, it drops you right into the story and expects us, the viewer, to keep up. What Saulnier does really well here is take a simple premise and elevate it with these striking moments of violence and social commentary. The core of the movie is about a man seeking justice, but what Saulnier does differently is he doesn't make this a traditional revenge thriller. There's a ton of nuance laid beneath, particularly when it comes to the portrayal of systemic corruption, and Saulnier isn't afraid to get dark. Even though there is some foreshadowing of what our hero is capable of, the film doesn't walk the oversaturated line of similar plots. Instead, it subverts expectations and becomes much more than what we've had before. Which leads me to the acting and some standout performances. Aaron Pierce, who leads the cast, is phenomenal. In The Railroad Underground, he was fantastic. I loved everything with him on screen, but Rebel Ridge gives him the space to show off his range. Aaron's character is quiet but intense, and you can feel the simmering rage just below the surface, which is precisely what a film like this needs. He can switch from calm and collected to intensely dangerous between breaths, and it's utterly compelling to watch. I love those moments, seeing him rage out underneath the eyes. You could see so much going on in his face. Another standout is Don Johnson, who plays a corrupt ex-police officer. The role could have easily been played as a one-dimensional villain. You know, the thousands we've had before, the millions that we get in Marvel, but Johnson adds layers to the character. He's slimy but charismatic, he has presence on screen, and when Johnson and Pierre are on screen together, the intensity often reaches boiling point, which is the fun parts to watch, even though what's often going on is very hard in theme. The supporting cast is solid too, and there are moments of genuine camaraderie and tension that heighten the film's stakes. But Aaron really anchors this movie. The way he holds himself, the few but precious dialogue moments, the subtle facial expressions, all of this leads to a character you can't see what he's going to do next, but you hope to be watching because you're captivated by watching him on screen. In many ways, Rebel Ridge reminds me of movies like Street Kings, Training Day, Serpico, and even Assault on Precinct 13. They are movies that explore the corruption embedded in police force and the thin line between law and chaos. So we've seen these themes used before and done well before, but when watching Rebel Ridge, it's probably a film that's going to make you a little bit mad, and maybe if you're white, ashamed of your skin color. That's not to say it's preachy though. What Saulnier does just amplifies the voice of the story, unflinching violence and moral ambiguity combined with beautifully crafted scenes with the story, so that it doesn't feel like you're being preached at. Rather, you, the viewer, are on a mission with Aaron to execute justice, which is grounded in reality. It's a system of law that can be bent to the will of those in power. And I'm getting angry again just thinking about it. My wife was particularly upset when watching this film. There's also a hint of Winter's Bone in how the film deals with rural America. The setting feels like a character in itself, isolating, almost suffocating, and it adds to the overall tension. You get this sense that there's no way out for Aaron's character, Terry Richmond, figuratively and literally. Literally. Let's talk about the cinematography, which is bleak, beautiful, and brutal. The cinematography in Rebel Ridge is gorgeously natural. Saulnier's films always look gorgeous, even when they depict intense scenes. The landscapes are cold and stark, even when our character is sweating and is feeling really warm, and it is warm. Wide shots of rural America make you feel both isolation and the danger of the environment. Our cinematographer here, David Gallego, does an excellent job of contrasting the wide open spaces with these really tight claustrophobic interiors. It's almost like the film is saying, yeah, you might be out in the middle of nowhere, but you're still gonna feel like you're trapped. Gallego previously did a phenomenal job with I Am Not a Witch. Give that a watch if you haven't yet. But I'm really looking forward to what he's going to be doing next. If this is kind of his forte into this type of film, he does a fantastic job. The way the action is shot is also impressive. Instead of quick cuts and shaky cams, Salonier prefers uninterrupted takes that make you feel every hit, every gunshot. It's gritty and realistic, and it keeps you on the edge pretty much the entire time, even though it's a slow burn of a film. And that brings me to pacing and tone. When people talk about slow burns, and you could basically take this film and say it's a slow burn, but it has some sharp turns in it. I don't know if that makes sense. But no doubt, Rebel Ridge is definitely a slow burn. If you're expecting non-stop action, this isn't the film for you. If you're expecting John Wick or Reacher, this isn't that. It takes its time to build characters and the tension before we get into the action, and even then, the action is real, heavy, and unforgiving. Not Wick. The pacing feels deliberate, almost methodical, which works for a film that is as much to do with what isn't said as to what is. That being said, there are moments when it drags a little, especially in the second act. But when the action does hit, it hits really hard. You feel it. The tone is dark as you'd expect, but it's not without moments of sharp, biting commentary. There's a bleak sense of humor that runs through this film. I found myself like giggling, not because of what was said was funny, but more for what our characters find themselves in. The places, the moments, the situation. Sort of like No Country for Old Men, where that film isn't funny, you chuckle a second before realizing how messed up the situation really is. You can't really talk about this film without talking about the racism in the police force. It's a timely and unflinching look. One of the most important themes Rebel Ridge tackles, Aaron's character is constantly dealing with pervasive corruption and brutality of the police. The opening scene of this movie sets you up for what you're in store for. So if you don't like the opening scene, you're not going to like the rest of the movie. But Salonier doesn't shy away from showing the ugly side of institutional racism. There's a lot of tension in this film between Aaron's character, a black man, and predominantly white corrupt police force, which feels so relevant today. What I appreciate is that Salonier doesn't make this theme feel forced. It's woven into the fabric of the film naturally and doesn't shy away from showing the brutal reality of what people of color face when dealing with law enforcement. There's a scene in the film, without giving too much away, that's both heartbreaking and infuriating. It feels like something that could be ripped straight out of today's headlines, and I would say even that, sometimes this film is timid compared to what we have in reality. So my final thoughts, it's a gritty, uncompromising thriller. Rebel Ridge is precisely what you'd expect from Jeremy Salonier. It's upsetting in all the right ways. Aaron's performance is incredible, and the film's exploration of corruption and systemic racism is handled with care, even if the pacing can be a bit slow at times. But that's to be expected with the building characters the way this film does. With wonderful cinematography, the direction is clever, and the whole thing feels like a punch to the gut in the best way possible. If you're a fan of slow burn thrillers that don't pull any punches, you're going to want to check this one out. We've had this story before, and you've seen this movie before, but this film is expertly crafted. The movie is relevant, and it's also entertaining to watch, even though it's a fairly darker one. So I give Rebel Ridge 4 out of 5 Nicolas Cages.
You got one.
Let me know in the comments if you're planning to watch Rebel Ridge and what you think about Jeremy Salonier's other films. I highly recommend The Green Room and the very under-celebrated Hold the Dark. I think that one was missed by a lot of people. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to thumbs up this video and give the subscribe, hit the subscribe, give it some love. It does help. If you liked my review and you found it informative, somewhat entertaining, then, hopefully I'll see you again soon. But remember, as always, live long and Tuesday.